Imagine a Gaza where every street, every checkpoint, and every horizon is monitored. A place split by vast corridors, crisscrossing the landscape like a chessboard. Israel's building these corridors to secure its borders and dismantle Hamas's influence. But these aren't just new roads. They're the groundwork for an entirely new reality, one where Israel can see and control any movement across Gaza in minutes. As you watch this video, you'll see how Israel's construction of strategic buffer zones, the Philadelphia, 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐿, and 𝐀𝐩𝐞𝐿 corridors, could reshape the map entirely, impacting millions of lives. This isn't just about controlling land. It's about control over movement, resources, and the balance of power. And with the possible addition of 2 new corridors, Gaza could soon look very different from what it's been for decades. So, how does this shape Israel's endgame? And what will it mean for the people who call Gaza home? Let's dive into the unfolding realities that could define Gaza's future. These areas will be reinforced with checkpoints, watchtowers, and surveillance systems, giving Israel's military the capability to monitor almost any movement in Gaza without the need to maintain a large physical occupation. In the view of Israel's leadership, these checkpoints and corridors provide a way to ensure security by allowing rapid response to threats without needing to be constantly on the ground across the territory. To grasp the significance of this corridor, we need to look back. The Philadelphia Corridor, a narrow strip around 14 kilometers long and about 100 meters wide, has long been a contentious stretch of land. In 1979, Israel and Egypt agreed that Israel could maintain a limited military presence here, and this buffer zone became a critical part of the Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. However, when Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, control of the corridor shifted to Egypt, with limited oversight from the Palestinian Authority. This arrangement, though temporary, was a fundamental component of Israel's 2005 disengagement from Gaza. But in 2007, when Hamas seized control of the Strip, everything changed. Faced with heavy blockades, Hamas began constructing an elaborate underground network of tunnels running from Gaza into Egypt. These tunnels served as vital supply lines, not just for smuggling goods, but for weapons as well. Between 2011 and 2015, Egyptian forces discovered and destroyed over 2,000 tunnels, at least those they could find. For both Israel and Egypt, these underground channels presented an ongoing security risk, creating realities on the ground that neither country could fully control. The corridors Israel is building now represent an effort to prevent Hamas from re-establishing these channels. Fast forward to May 2024, when violence erupted once more, and Israel decided to retake control of the Philadelphia Corridor. This time, Israel's government insists that its presence is necessary and long-term. Netanyahu's cabinet has argued that unless Israel controls this passage, Hamas will eventually rearm and rebuild its military infrastructure, making Gaza a permanent security concern for Israel. For Netanyahu and his supporters, this corridor is essential for maintaining national security by limiting Hamas's ability to smuggle resources into Gaza. But the Philadelphia Corridor isn't the only buffer zone Israel is creating. Just to the north lies the 𝐀𝐻𝐿 Corridor, heavily fortified and monitored by multiple forward operating bases. A third corridor, the 𝐀𝐻𝐿 Corridor, is taking shape near Khan Yunis, linking strategic Israeli checkpoints to the Mediterranean. However, diplomatically, these fortified corridors are creating new obstacles for any potential ceasefire negotiations. Palestinian leaders argue that these buffer zones infringe on their territory, fracturing Gaza into isolated sections that make unity and normal life nearly impossible. Egypt has also voiced concerns, warning that a permanent Israeli presence in the Philadelphia corridor could violate the long-standing peace treaty between the two nations. If we look at Gaza as it stands today, it becomes clear that Israel's construction of these zones is creating what some call a fish tank effect. With the Philadelphia, 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐮𝐭, and 𝐀𝐩𝐿 corridors, Gaza's urban areas and towns are sectioned off, restricting free movement between northern, central, and southern regions of the Strip. This configuration would allow Israeli forces to monitor every major entry and exit point, responding within minutes to potential threats. The timing of this focus on Gaza is significant, as it comes amid broader tensions in northern Israel and Lebanon, where clashes with Hezbollah and Iran's involvement are intensifying. While Israel's borders face challenges on multiple fronts, it's clear that the plan for Gaza remains a priority. Even in the context of larger conflicts, Israel's strategy for Gaza points toward a clear endgame: dismantling Hamas's presence, controlling access and supply lines, and limiting the possibility of rearmament. For the people of Gaza, the future is uncertain. As these corridors take shape, the territory is being divided into smaller sections, creating realities that will be difficult to reverse even if hostilities subside. Israel's corridor strategy essentially allows it to oversee life within Gaza without needing a continuous, large-scale occupation. Although the map might change, the tension and division between these communities are likely to persist. Since the latest round of hostilities began, both sides have tossed around different proposals to find some middle ground. One idea was for Israel to withdraw its ground forces but keep a network of watchtowers along the border. But Egypt has firmly rejected this idea, maintaining that the entire corridor needs to remain a neutral buffer space. For Israel, the goal in Gaza is clear: prevent any future Hamas buildup by maintaining a lasting presence in key areas. But there's more in play here. Just north of the Philadelphia corridor, there's another area that's shaping up to be just as significant: the 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐮 corridor. This new zone stretches around 6 kilometers long and 2 kilometers wide, reaching from Israel's boundary to the Mediterranean, and effectively dividing Gaza City from the rest of the territory. The name 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐮 itself is loaded with symbolism. It was once the name of an Israeli settlement within Gaza before Israel's 2005 withdrawal. As it stands, the 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐮 corridor is not just a road, it's a fortified area with at least 5 forward operating bases. These outposts give Israel tight control over movement between the northern and southern parts of Gaza. By building and maintaining these bases, Israel is signaling that even if the current fighting ends, their presence won't. When Palestinian civilians eventually return, Israel's infrastructure will remain, giving them the ability to monitor life in Gaza without needing a full occupation. Now Netanyahu has openly declared that Israel won't give up the Philadelphia or 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐮 corridors in any truce agreement, even including the strategically critical Rafah crossing. Palestinian representatives have rejected the notion of buffer zones within these areas, claiming that Netanyahu is pushing these demands to complicate the path to a ceasefire. The US and UN have been caught off guard, as the Biden administration's plan for negotiations didn't factor in Israeli claims to these corridors, and neither did the latest UN Security Council discussions. But Netanyahu is pressing on, seemingly without external pressure altering his stance. Israeli forces have moved into the port of Khan Yunis and cleared out a stretch of land leading toward Israel's town of Kisufim. The area has been flattened, and buildings along this line have been destroyed, paving the way for what looks like the foundation of a new corridor. This strip marks one of Gaza's narrowest points, and it will give Israel quick, direct access to Khan Yunis if needed. While the exact width of this Kisufim corridor is still uncertain, it's likely to follow a layout similar to the 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐿 zone. With these corridors taking shape, Israel's approach is becoming more apparent. A system of interconnected zones, each fortified and monitored, that allows Israeli forces to oversee and control movement across Gaza. For the people living within these zones, it's a sign of a future with tighter restrictions on movement and fewer options for autonomy. For Israel, it's about reshaping the landscape to make a long-term Hamas presence unsustainable. The big question now is whether any ceasefire deal can account for these new realities on the ground, or if Israel will continue to call the shots in Gaza's future. Let's break down the impact of Israel's 3 buffer zones across Gaza, the Philadelphia, 𝐀𝐻𝐨𝐿, and Kisufim corridors. With these 3 corridors, Gaza is effectively split into 3 main blocks, creating tightly controlled segments that alter the region's dynamics. But that's not the end of it. Recently, Doctors of the World reported that in August 2024, Israeli forces scaled back the humanitarian zone, relocating civilians and aid workers and further shrinking the safe area. There's also talk of yet another corridor, the 5th in the plan, which would divide the northern Gaza town of Beit Hanun from Gaza City. Another diagonal route, this 5th corridor would create a small, isolated area in northern Gaza that some Israeli hardliners envision for possible resettlement. Although it's too soon to say whether these last 2 corridors will be built, the idea has strong backing among certain Israeli leaders who see these barriers as a strategic advantage. If all 5 corridors are realized, Israel's presence and surveillance over Gaza will be near total. In effect, Gaza would become a fish tank, with Israeli security forces able to monitor and respond quickly to any point in the region. This layered defense approach isn't just about current security. It's also about ensuring that Hamas, the longtime adversary, is cut off from regrouping or rebuilding. For Israel, this is part of a larger strategy. Hamas has been diminished from an organization capable of firing thousands of rockets to a limited insurgency, now only able to launch sporadic attacks. The goal for Israel now is to prevent Hamas from ever returning to full strength. Still, Israel's endgame goes beyond just containing Hamas. Under this plan, Palestinian civilians would eventually return to their homes, and in some cases, Israeli settlers might too. But these corridors, while effective for security, could also become future flashpoints for conflict. And while the map may change and borders may shift, the deep-rooted tensions between Israelis and Palestinians remain. These corridors may reshape Gaza physically, but they don't address the underlying conflicts that drive the unrest, and for many on both sides, those tensions are only likely to deepen. And there you have it, the stark realities of Gaza's future, as Israel reshapes it from the ground up. As we've seen, these corridors could drastically alter the lives of millions, creating a security network, but also an unprecedented level of oversight and control. Whether this will lead to stability or more tension is yet to be seen, but one thing is clear: the stakes for Gaza, Israel, and the entire region are higher than ever. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more in-depth analysis on unfolding global issues.